Some breaking news right now. Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein has taken his own life while he was behind bars here in New York City. Epstein was facing sex trafficking charges.
Mel Gibson was right, and they've been lying to you for 25 years. Back in 1998, he warned about Hollywood's dark underbelly. At the time, everyone dismissed it as the ranting of a troubled star. But the Epstein files suggest he may have been documenting something much bigger. Right now, insiders are scrambling after the latest leak, a bank transfer labeled BL.name, tied to an account used for transactions that raise serious questions, not just of corruption, but something far more disturbing. The files don't just name names, they expose a system. 3 million pages were expected to drop this week. Instead, the DOJ released only a fraction and then abruptly paused the rest, citing victim privacy while many alleged victims remain unheard. When Nicki Minaj made her Grammy night accusation about blood sacrifices to their god, it was labeled a meltdown. Now, some see it differently, especially after emails surfaced in which Epstein referred to victims as shrimp to be discarded. The sulfuric acid purchase, the mysterious ball account, the sudden halt in document releases, none of it feels random. The files aren't just evidence, they're a ledger of who may still be protected. And the next batch isn't just delayed. Some believe it's being buried.
The Justice Department has finally released some of the highly anticipated Epstein files. More than 300,000 pages of documents related to the late convicted sex offender were made public today. They include photos, flight logs, grand jury testimony, and a lot of heavy redactions.
The Epstein files weren't supposed to be released like this. The first batch in 2024 appeared controlled and sanitized. A few names, some embarrassing photos, the usual scandal cycle. Then last December, the DOJ hit pause, claiming they needed more time to redact sensitive material. But insiders suggest a different reason. The next tranche wasn't just damaging, it was explosive. Now, with the latest leak revealing a bank transfer labeled BL.name, linked to Epstein's accounts, what was meant to remain a contained scandal is spiraling into something far uglier. These files don't merely implicate, they incriminate. And the people who believe they were safe are realizing the ledger may still be open.
Apparently not everything. We've got indications from the Department of Justice that there are things that are going to be withheld, at least, or handed out at a later date. Now, the law in this case that was passed by Congress and signed by President Trump required that all the Epstein files be released by midnight tonight, Friday, December 19th.
This is where the official story begins to crack. The DOJ insists the delay is about protecting victims. Yet the timing raises questions. The pause came just as researchers began examining the ball reference, a term some claim is tied to ancient ritual symbolism. Fact-checkers call it a misprint. Others who claim to have seen more complete files call it confirmation. Epstein wasn't just a predator, they argue. He was part of a system, and systems protect themselves. Then there's the sulfuric acid purchase in August 2018. The same day the FBI quietly reopened his case. Authorities say it was unrelated. Critics say 330 gallons isn't about cleaning paperwork. It's about making sure nothing remains.
Definitely digital evidence, it seems, from what has been reported. And in considering what that digital evidence can show, we have to think like an investigator again. So think about what may be on a hard drive, on a computer, on a phone, and what it would mean to prove whether a certain person engaged in a certain act, and whether or not that would be a recorded act, or it would just be the reporting of an alleged victim that we would be seeing with no connection to anybody else.
The files that have slipped out paint a picture that's harder to dismiss outright. There's the email where Epstein refers to victims as shrimp. Throw away the top, keep the body. There's the 2017 import of 3 pieces of the kiswa, the sacred cloth from Islam's holiest site, reportedly shipped to his private residence. Some religious scholars describe it as devotion. Others see it as a wealthy man collecting symbolic relics. Then there's the hunting photo. Prince Andrew, Ghislaine Maxwell, and a group of young women at Balmoral, the royal family's Scottish estate. The official explanation calls it a social gathering. Those who claim to have seen unredacted versions say the blurred faces tell another story. This is where the Mel Gibson connection stops feeling coincidental. In 1998, he described Hollywood as a place where your worst nightmares are real. He portrayed it as a town operating like a cult, where power shields itself. The media labeled him unhinged. Studios distanced themselves. Then, in 2023, he produced Sound of Freedom, a film about trafficking networks disguised as modeling opportunities. Critics dismissed it as propaganda. Supporters called it a warning. The parallels, some argue, are striking. Young girls lured with promises of fame, powerful men pulling strings, and institutions looking the other way. While Mel Gibson's career faced intense public scrutiny in the mid-2000s, Epstein secured a plea deal that allowed him to serve just 13 months in a private wing of a Florida jail with work release. In 2008, as Gibson was being publicly condemned for personal controversies, Epstein's crimes were quietly minimized. One man's reputation was dismantled. The other's case was contained. The lingering question isn't just what Mel Gibson believed. It's what remains hidden, and whose names are still protected.
Now, the first step in eradicating this crime is awareness. Go see Sound of Freedom.
Then there's the Nicki Minaj factor. Her Grammy night post in 2026, accusing an unnamed artist of participating in blood sacrifices, was widely dismissed as a meltdown. But the language she used closely mirrors warnings Mel Gibson made decades earlier. "Your favorite artist has been practicing rituals," she wrote. "When your master is Satan, you must constantly shed blood." The media focused on the sensationalism, but the Epstein files suggest she may not have been inventing a conspiracy. She may have been describing one. The artist she referenced is allegedly named in the unreleased pages, the same pages the DOJ has yet to release. The files that have surfaced so far aren't just records of crimes. They form a map of who was allowed to operate with impunity. Bill Clinton photographed in hot tubs with Ghislaine Maxwell. Emails allegedly referencing Richard Branson discussing bringing a harem to meetings. Reports claiming Elon Musk attempted to coordinate a visit to Epstein's island, despite public denials. These aren't just scandals, they're receipts. And the receipts don't only show who was present, they suggest who was never supposed to be exposed. The sulfuric acid purchase, the ball account, the sudden halt in document releases. None of it appears random. It forms a pattern, one that suggests the files aren't just about Epstein, but about the people who ensured he could keep operating.
When it comes to what's in these files, we've seen dozens of new photos we haven't seen before of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell with very high-profile people, celebrities, people like Mick Jagger and Michael Jackson, like you showed, also like British royalty and actors. All of that we sort of knew was happening. I want to highlight specifically two for the public interest, and that is President Clinton and President Trump.
The most damning part isn't what's in the files, it's what's still missing. The DOJ claims the unreleased pages contain sensitive material. Insiders claim they contain names powerful enough to collapse careers, reputations, even industries. According to critics, the halt isn't about privacy, it's about survival. And those who believe they're safe should look at what happened to Mel Gibson. He spoke too loudly, he saw too much, and some argue he was silenced. The files may be only the first step. The purge they suggest could come next. Because these documents don't just expose alleged criminals, they expose the system that protected them. And that system for now is still standing. This isn't just about Epstein. It's about the machinery that kept him operating for decades, and the people who may still benefit from that machinery running smoothly. Consider Mel Gibson's career collapse in the mid-2000s. The media framed it as self-destruction, drunken rants, offensive remarks, public controversies that made him radioactive in Hollywood. But the timing raises questions. His downfall began shortly after The Passion of the Christ became a global phenomenon. A film about sacrifice and betrayal that no major studio initially wanted to support until he funded it himself. Then came the blacklisting, the character attacks, the gradual erasure from Hollywood's inner circle. Meanwhile, Epstein secured plea deals, served minimal time, and maintained relationships with many of the same power players who publicly condemned Gibson. Some call that coincidence, others call it coordination. The real question isn't whether Gibson was controversial, it's whether he became dangerous to the wrong people.
That some of your worst nightmares were real at the time, and you think, Now this is what I mean by actually.
There's also a pattern in how these scandals are contained. When the first Epstein files were released, the media focused on sensational details, photos, emails, celebrity names. But the real story may have been what wasn't included. The DOJ's sudden halt on releasing the remaining 3 million pages was officially framed as victim protection. Critics argue it was about protecting the system system that allowed Epstein to operate for years, the same system that blacklisted Mel Gibson, the same system now attempting to control the narrative. The files released so far may not be the full story. They may be the distraction. The real ledger, the one containing names that would truly matter, remains locked away. And those holding the keys are unlikely to surrender them without resistance. Then there are the darker undertones within the files. The ball account, the Kiswa cloth imports, the symbolic language in Epstein's emails. Supporters of this theory argue these details aren't random. They're ritualistic, and rituals require participants. The files suggest Epstein may not have acted alone, but as part of a larger network, one allegedly protected because it included individuals considered untouchable. The hunting photos at Balmoral, the gatherings involving Bill Clinton, the reported visits by powerful tech billionaires. These weren't just parties, critics claim. They were meetings of influence. And the fact that many of these figures remain free, protected by the same institutions that dismantled Gibson's reputation, raises questions about who truly holds power.
From what I've gathered from your articles, this seems to be a global network that Epstein was a part of. And I believe there are multiple Epsteins. Like, I don't believe that Jeffrey Epstein was the head of the snake. Yeah. Like, you know, they never go after the head of the snake. They never go after
the head of the snake, quote unquote, are just, it's the billionaire class. And so there's a faction of these billionaires in our oligarchy. And of course, the American oligarchy, you know, the American oligarchs don't necessarily, a lot of them don't have an allegiance necessarily to the United States.
The Sound of Freedom connection is, to some, more than eerie, it's a blueprint. Produced by Mel Gibson, the film portrays a trafficking ring disguised as a modeling operation, powerful men pulling strings, and institutions looking the other way. To critics, the parallels to the Epstein files are striking. Gibson didn't stumble onto this narrative overnight. He had been warning about corruption in Hollywood for years. Yet when the film was released, many outlets dismissed it as propaganda. The same outlets that later acknowledged the legitimacy of the Epstein files. According to supporters, this reflects a broader pattern. The system doesn't just protect its own, it discredits anyone who attempts to expose it. Some argue Gibson's career suffered as a result of that defiance. Now the question becomes, who's next? Will the remaining files force a reckoning that has been avoided for decades? Revisiting Nicki Minaj's Grammy post adds another layer. When she accused an unnamed artist of participating in blood sacrifices, the media framed it as an outburst. But her phrasing, your favorite artist, blood sacrifices to their god, mirrors themes some believe appear within the Epstein documents. The files don't just describe alleged crimes, they suggest a culture where certain behaviors are normalized, certain rituals are performed, and participants are shielded by power and status. Minaj's post wasn't vague, it was specific. And the fact that the artist she referenced remains unnamed is, to many observers, the most telling detail of all. Because if the name isn't public, it suggests one thing. Someone may still be controlling the narrative.
I'm sorry that the Bureau of Prisons gets to decide. The Bureau of Prisons is run independently from the FBI, from the U.S. Attorney's Office, from the judiciary, and who knows where the person's going to go. That's just how it happens. Right. So for Ghislaine Maxwell to have been transferred to actually a prison that has very, very minimal security and is just not fit for someone who's been convicted of horrible crimes against children.
The files released so far may only represent the first layer. The real damage, some believe, will come when, or if, the remaining documents are ever made public. Critics argue the DOJ's halt isn't about redacting sensitive material. It's about buying time. The names in those unreleased pages aren't just influential. They're considered untouchable. Or at least they were. The sulfuric acid purchase, the ball account, the hunting photos. These aren't just scattered details. Supporters of this theory say they point to a system that has operated in plain sight for years. And the fact that many of the individuals allegedly involved are still walking free, still protected by the same institutions that dismantled Mel Gibson's career, raises deeper questions about power and protection. But the fear isn't only about what's inside the files. It's about what happens to those who try to expose them. Mel Gibson's career was heavily damaged after he publicly hinted at darker forces within Hollywood. Since then, critics claim a pattern has emerged. Those who get too close to the truth don't just lose influence, they disappear from public view. Virginia Giuffre, whose testimony played a key role in exposing elements of the Epstein network, reportedly passed away in 2025. Her death was described as the tragic end of a troubled life. Yet some observers questioned the timing, noting she had recently completed a memoir naming individuals not yet fully exposed. To many, her passing wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was interpreted as a warning. And those who understood that message, they argue, became noticeably quieter. Then there's Christopher Mason, the composer who claimed Ghislaine Maxwell had attempted to recruit Paris Hilton for Epstein. His statements in the documentary series Surviving Jeffrey Epstein were among the earliest public accusations directed at Maxwell. But after the files began surfacing, Mason seemingly vanished from public life. No interviews, no statements, no online presence. A similar silence followed Sarah Ransom, one of Epstein's accusers. She spoke openly for years about the abuse she endured. Her last public appearance was in 2024, just before the first batch of files was released. Since then, there has been nothing. No farewell, no explanation, only silence.
The Maxwell interview is and never was part of the Epstein files. She was sentenced in 2025. This was an interview by Trump's lawyer to protect Trump from the fallout about the Epstein files. What this really is nothing but a sketchy PR stunt by the Department of Justice. And we have seen this movie before. The Maxwell interview is to the Epstein files what the Barr letter was to the Mueller investigation.
According to critics, the pattern extends beyond victims. Journalists who have investigated the Epstein case too aggressively have reported unusual setbacks. One investigative reporter working on financial links between Epstein and offshore accounts allegedly tied to powerful politicians suddenly lost access to key sources. His laptop was stolen from a locked hotel room. The article was never published. Another journalist researching connections between Epstein's island and high-profile visitors found his research files corrupted. Every digital copy, every backup erased. The message, supporters argue, was unmistakable. Some stories are not meant to be told. Mel Gibson's situation is different, but the fear surrounding him is similar. He isn't just portrayed as a whistleblower. To some, he's a high-profile target. If the files validate his long-standing warnings, that makes him dangerous to powerful interests. Those who allegedly silence figures like Giuffre and Ransom, critics claim, would not allow someone of Gibson's stature to continue speaking without consequences. The rumors about his safety are seen by supporters not as paranoia, but as pattern recognition. The powerful, they argue, don't simply discredit opponents, they erase them. Fans aren't only concerned about Gibson's career anymore. They're concerned about his safety. The same figures who once dismissed him as a conspiracy theorist are now, according to supporters, referenced within the files. And powerful people don't surrender influence quietly, they fight back. The sulfuric acid, the ball account, the hunting photos. These aren't relics of the past, critics insist. They are signs of a system still active. And Mel Gibson has been warning about it for decades. The question isn't simply whether he's in danger. It's what happens when those accused of covering this up realize he isn't going to stop speaking.
There's too much circumstantial evidence that leads me to believe that it was an assassination. You know, I know a lot of people think that he committed, a lot of very smart people that I know think he committed. I'm like, there's too many convenient things. The cut wires, the security cameras rather not working. They weren't cut, right? They just stopped. They didn't function. Security cameras didn't function. The fact that he had shared a cell with this giant former cop.
The silence surrounding Mel Gibson's security has not gone unnoticed. There have been no major public statements about protection, no interviews addressing threats, no visible reassurance from his team. Just a man who many supporters believe was right all along, standing in the middle of controversy. Meanwhile, the same voices that once labeled him unstable now face scrutiny themselves. The files are public. The conversation is spreading. And those who built their reputations on denial may not step aside quietly. Supporters believe retaliation is more likely than retreat. The most unsettling part of this story isn't what has been released. It's what remains hidden. The names not yet disclosed. The photos not yet seen. The emails not yet leaked. To critics, the system exposed by the Epstein case isn't chaotic. It's efficient. And systems built over decades don't collapse without resistance. Some believe the document releases are only the beginning. What follows, they argue, could be a reckoning. So where does that leave us? Supporters claim the files validate Mel Gibson's early warnings, that the system he described was real and remains operational. They argue the DOJ's halt isn't about protecting victims, but about protecting powerful individuals. And the fact that so many names remain untouched suggests the hierarchy of control is still intact. The final question becomes unavoidable. Who will be the next Mel Gibson? Who will see too much, speak too loudly, and pay the price? When the remaining files are released, if they are, whose names will appear? Artists? Politicians? Billionaires? Or the architects who kept everything hidden? Because one thing is certain, this story isn't over. Not even close. Stay sharp.